Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. Today I'm going to be talking about anti-natalism and kind of the debate that we had, or well, it was a bit of a fiasco, really wasn't a debate, with inmendham a few days back. And really, I wasn't really satisfied with that, obviously. That's not the way that I envision a debate happening. I was a bit disappointed with him because I think, despite what he claims of Logan being cheeky or kind of instigating with him, and he didn't like his glasses and whatever, the fact remains that that is not how you handle yourself when you're trying to engage in an intellectual debate with anybody. I think in anybody's view, once you resort to just crazy name calling and insulting the other person and yelling at the top of your lungs, you've lost the debate, no matter what your stance and your view is. But I don't really want to say, oh, he lost because because he lost his cool. I mean, everybody can lose their cool, and I don't think I definitely didn't want to instigate him, and I don't think Logan wanted to either. That's obviously kind of his shtick and his kind of like style of the way he does his videos. And I think you can say whatever you want, but I think inmendham knew that because he obviously saw his videos. So like making it up after the fact that that's why he lost his cool, because it's an excuse, obviously. But anyway, I want to talk about kind of my views on anti-natalism and clear up some things, because there's a lot of comments and I have not had time. I've been gone. I've been doing the race. I haven't been able to go through all those comments, and there's just tons and tons of stuff that I've seen in there that are very inaccurate, and I just want to clear things up and also kind of, actually state my position, because I didn't get to do it in a debate format. And obviously what I talked about with Logan was more about kind of what happened, and we talked about what he presented, not my own views necessarily, or not fully explained. So that's what I want to do today. And I just got some notes here that I want to follow. So yeah, basically, what I want to state up front is that I've got several videos about kind of like religious topics on my channel. If anybody hasn't seen that, you can definitely look through them. And I actually want this channel to be as inclusive as possible. And I don't bring religion into the topic of veganism. The point of this channel is to introduce as many people as possible to the idea of veganism and make it as attractive as possible, because I think it's a better, more ethical, healthier, more sustainable, more morally correct way to live. And that's, my intention is to basically get as many people to that side of, the thinking or whatever as possible. And I think, a lot of the kind of charges that are leveled at vegans are typically like, well, you're getting your food imported and all this kind of stuff, and you're hurting the environment regardless, and killing the bugs and the insects. And that's why I'm trying to create my own food forest. That's why I'm trying to push that gardening aspect of things as much as possible to people, because I think that is ultimately the most kind of like ethically sourced food that you can possibly have, is stuff that you've grown out of your backyard without the use of chemicals, without the use of pesticides, without killing bugs, without killing mice, all this kind of stuff. And if you create a good ecosystem, as I've said in many of my videos, I really believe that you can achieve that and still have some left over, and not be greedy and not have to take all of the fruits of your labor and leave some for the birds, leave some for the rodents. Like it's totally fine. There's going to be enough there for everybody. You don't have to kill off all the pests, quote unquote. They just want to live too. So anyway, if anybody hasn't seen any of those videos, definitely look through those. You'll see my stance pretty clearly. To get back to the religious topic, I think the point of doing those videos is not to tell people to be religious. If you are religious, that's great. If you're not religious, that's great too. My point is, you can be moral or immoral whether or not you are religious, whether or not you believe that there is a God or there isn't a God, or there are gods, or whatever you want to believe in. The point of Logan's question to inmendham was certainly not to try to convince him of there being a God or not being a God. I think he rightfully demanded that inmendham present proof of his belief, because unlike what a lot of people are kind of screaming on about in the comments, the point wasn't Logan's to make, and he was not telling inmendham that he needs to prove that there are no such thing as leprechauns or whatever in order for his point to be valid. It's quite the opposite. Inmendham is actually like really like guilty of this in all of his videos that I've seen. What he will do is basically stop people. I think that's why he doesn't do well in the live debates, because he can't stop people, because he just comes across as being extremely rude, which he is, and incredibly arrogant. But when he plays back people's videos, he can just stop them and then interject all sorts of crazy stuff on top of it that has nothing to do with what the person said, totally distract the viewer into some other realm of thing, and then try to put words in the mouth, so to speak, of the person making their point. And that's what he tried to do there too, and he's screaming on and on about leprechauns and what have you. The point isn't that Logan was trying to say, you should believe in leprechauns and that's why you should have babies, because the great leprechaun in wherever leprechaun land is telling you that you should have millions of babies and that's how you'll be happy. And then, inmendham is saying that's crazy to believe in leprechauns and there is no great leprechaun and blah, blah, blah. No, it's quite the opposite. Inmendham has a view that because there's no God, therefore, it is just a sick, twisted, kind of random series of events that has brought us to our existence, and that therefore, he's going to try to somehow fix this because it's sort of a mistake. It's something that should never have happened. So it's his assertion that there is no God, and it's his assertion that he's 100. Well, I mean, in the debate, he said he's 100% sure. As many people in the comments said, most atheists will say that they're not 100% sure. Again, this is neither here nor there, but he's the one who's making the assertion that there is no God. He's basing his ideas on this assertion. So it should be a valid question to say, well, how are you coming to this statement that there is no God? And he has no real proof for it other than the fact that it's just such a random, series of things that there's no way that it could be that planned out. And he's bringing all sorts of things like intention into it. Like, if you were a God, would you set up this kind of world and whatever? Again, if there is a God, you don't have to believe in it or not. But could it be conceivable that maybe that God has some kind of knowledge or understanding of the way things are or should be that is a little bit more advanced than ours, and maybe things are pretty good the way they are? I don't know. And again, like, it's just incredibly arrogant to state like no and clearly, and you're the one who has to kill the lions and whatever. It's like, no, man, that's not how it works. Like, you're the one making the assertion, and then you're putting words in the other person's mouth, trying to make them seem like they're the ones who are crazy, to tell you that, like, you have to prove something ridiculous like leprechauns don't exist. No, I didn't even want to talk about God. So anyway, that's just that. My thing is this. He's, as far as I can understand it, and this is why I wanted to clarify it, because I don't think all the antinatalists all believe the same thing. But as far as I understand it, inmendham does believe in Benatar's logic, which is the asymmetry between pleasure and pain. And there is kind of this statement. I'm going to just read through it because I don't want to mess it up. So he says, David Benatar says, the presence of pain is bad. That's number one. I would argue with this right off the bat, because not all pain is bad. Pain protects you and keeps you safe from stuff. When you put your hand on the fire, that's pain. It's telling you, hey, dude, pull your hand away. That's good. So it's like, this is just an oversimplified statement, but I don't want to even like nitpick it because it's kind of like semantics at that point. But okay, so let's give it to it, but I'm going to caveat that already is, I think, kind of a silly statement. Next statement, the presence of pleasure is good. Well, again, can you think of an example where pleasure is actually bad? Yeah, like maybe a drug overdose. The immediate high is good, but what it leads to is bad. So again, you can just say that this is not 100% accurate, but let's just go with it. Next thing, the absence of pain is good, even if that good is not enjoyed by anyone. Now again, I would argue with this, because the next thing that he says is that the absence of pleasure is not bad unless there is somebody for whom this absence is a deprivation. Now obviously it's like, if you're taking away the pleasure that someone is kind of expecting to get, then that is bad because you're depriving them of it. And what he's saying in the absence of the pain is being good. But he's saying that that's also the case even if there's nobody who's enjoying the absence of the pain. Now, I don't think that those two things go together. He's using like one logic to explain one event, and then he's coming to the opposite conclusion with the the reciprocal of it. That's not how things work. So right off the bat, I think that's just kind of like a fundamental like problem with what I see, and he has not explained this. So anyway, he tried, in his reply video to me, well, it wasn't to me, but it was to the debate. He played through certain sections of it, and he kind of tried to twist my words around, and you can watch that if you want, but you'll see that he's basically not understanding what I'm saying there. So anyway, I don't think this is a good starting point, and I would already argue with this just in and of itself as being kind of the basis on what he builds up his argument on. But let's move on from there, because again, it's just kind of like semantics. I'm just going to say, for the sake of this argument and for the sake of this video, let's just accept these as they are and move on. The next thing, he says that if he got shot in the back of the head with a .44 caliber or whatever he said, and he wouldn't feel any pain, then that's fine. That's not immoral. Now, I would absolutely argue with that and say that that is immoral. You cannot take somebody's life who wants to live and who has no, like sickness or ill health or wants to die. Like, I'm not talking about assisted suicide or, somebody's like very, very severely mentally ill or totally, incapacitated. I'm not talking about that. He was talking about he's walking on the street and somebody walks up to him and shoots him in the back of the head. That's a completely different thing. And if you think about it, this is already like a huge logical fail and moral inconsistency from his position. He says that he's vegan. He says that he's vegan because he recognizes that the suffering of the other, sentient being is just like his own. He recognizes the moral worth of the other sentient being just as his own, just as he has moral worth, and he wouldn't want something done to himself. But if you think about what people argue against vegans, they say there's humane slaughter. You take the cow in and you shoot him in the head with the stun gun. He doesn't know what's going on in the ideal world. Of course, we know that that's not true, because they sense it and they smell it, and there's death and blood and just horrible like fear all around them. So we know. But in the ideal meat eater like world, you think you can bring the cow into some magical room and they don't even know what's going on, and all of a sudden, boom, they're dead. Like, even if that were the case, vegans argue that that's wrong, because that cow still wanted to live. The cow didn't want to die. He didn't consent to you killing him, and there was nothing wrong with him. He wasn't unhealthy. He wasn't in pain, and you just killed him because you wanted to eat him. So, again, even what he said as his own example against, like killing himself, like that's already morally inconsistent with his argument for like veganism. So that's just that's a fail right there. Other thing, that we actually pointed out in the kind of aftermath of when he left, there could be people who miss him. There could be other people, like ancillary, suffering that happens because somebody gets killed like that. So that's another thing. I think he would have acknowledged that, though. So I think maybe he was just being rash and he said that. But let's, again, move on beyond that. He also said that, he wouldn't feel a thing. And again, this is just very fundamentally flawed. The point isn't that the cow or the pig or the chicken or whatever getting killed feels a thing or not. The point is you're ending its life, and it has moral worth. The person has moral worth. That's why, even if you have somebody who's incredibly ill or sick, if they still want to live, it's not okay for you to kill them. Even if you do it in a totally painless way, you just put them to sleep or whatever. Like euthanizing people, if they still want to live and they still have, an interest in living, is still morally wrong. And it's not because of the suffering. It's not because you can't kill them without pain. I mean, we have the technology to do that. You can inject sleeping drugs. You can, stop their heart. You can do all sorts of stuff. So this is just nonsensical, kind of thing. He's like twisting things around, and he's making it an argument about suffering. And this is, again, it doesn't even jive with the moral ethics behind veganism. So it's like he almost doesn't even understand that, it seems. Okay. Another thing that I want to point out is that, again, I said it's the moral worth. That is what we are considering when we are saying that it's wrong to kill the animals, not because they are being killed in a way that doesn't produce suffering. The other thing is that if you think about his position, if you had a person, in Mendham's view, like based on what he was kind of saying, you could say that, look, this person has cancer, this person has a missing leg, this person has diabetes, this person has whatever ailment. I'm going to decide that because this person's mentally challenged and they don't have any friends, they don't have any family, they're in an institution, it's okay to kill them because they're better off dead than alive. And he's in his view, like that sounds like it's okay based on what he's saying. The fact that you could shoot him in the back of the head and it would be okay because he wouldn't be suffering. Like that's not okay. I think most people would understand that would be incredibly wrong, incredibly immoral, and they wouldn't be supportive of that. But again, for the purpose of this argument and for talking about antinatalism in general, let's go beyond that. Let's go to the point that you know what? He's right. Suffering is bad, blah, blah, blah. Let's destroy the whole world. Let's convince every single person in the world that that's the way to go. And let's do it. Every single person in the whole wide world who has the intellectual capacity and whatever to understand this, they all get on board and they all decide, like, this is the way to do it. Okay. Everybody's on board. They're going to start building the nukes and whatever. Maybe it'll be some new technology that we don't even have yet, because as I mentioned on the aftermath of that video, I don't even think you can actually blow up the world, because I'm not sure that there's enough, basically fuel for the nuclear bombs. I don't know that. I'd have to look into it, and I don't really want to. But let's assume that it can be done, or we'll make some technology that will happen. We convinced every person on Earth, even putting aside those moral considerations, like I said, of the people who wouldn't be able to have those kind of discussions and wouldn't be able to give their consent. Now, let's assume we got past that somehow, because we got the guardians of those people to agree to it and all this kind of stuff. We've built the technology, we're going to blow up the world. Now, what about all of the other sentient beings on this earth who you can never, ever get their consent from to do that, to end their life, to end their whole world and their whole existence, because you've decided, because inmendham decided, because people have decided that we are going to be basically the God who fixes the thing that the non-existent God created, and it's all messed up and it sucks and the world is terrible. It's like you now are like in an incredibly morally inconsistent place. You have now decided, just as in the case of like the mentally disabled person, you've decided that for all other beings who are not mentally disabled, you just simply can't communicate with them. You can't get consent from an animal to do that. You can't communicate with them on that level. Even if you could do it with every single person on Earth, which again, just think of just the challenge of that. How do you convince close to 8 billion people to do one thing? Like it's like, and he says this in his videos, like, oh, it's going to take years and blah blah blah. Yeah, like years. Like, forget that. It's never going to happen. I mean, but that's not the argument against it, that, oh, it'll never happen. Because people say that about veganism. Oh, it'll never happen, so why are you trying? That's not my argument. My point is, even if you've got it, you now have to. You've now decided for the rest of the sentient creatures on Earth that you know better than them that their life is better off non-existing than existing. It's completely inconsistent. You cannot do that. Those people, those animals, those sentient beings, cannot give you their consent. It's the same reason why it's immoral, in my view, to impregnate artificially a cow so that you can steal its milk. They can't give you consent to have you put your arm up their backside and impregnate them with semen from a bull that you also took from him without any kind of consent. That's why people can get offended by it or whatever, but that's why vegan activists will sometimes say that it's rape, it's not artificial insemination. You can't get consent. That's why, maybe it's people will say, oh, you're anthropomorphizing or whatever. I can't even pronounce that word correctly. But it's like, no, that's the whole point. You can't get their consent, therefore it's immoral. So if you can't get their consent for impregnating them and taking their milk or killing them or taking their babies or whatever, then how do you think you're going to get consent to end their existence? This makes no sense. It's a huge fail. So, yeah, I mean, I think I've covered a lot of what I wanted to say. I want to add a few other things, going back again to to what I sort of said in the after discussion with Logan. Again, you convince all the humans, you make this like bomb apparatus, you blow up the world, but you don't destroy everything. You have some of these tiny little, either single cell organisms that stay alive, or you get these little, I forget, there were several people in the comments who said what would survive. I think they're called like water bears or something like that. I can't remember the scientific name for them. I'll put it in the link in the description of the video. But basically, let's assume that some of these little critters stay alive. Now, who's to say that, again, the evil boogeyman of evolution, the DNA, whatever inmendham wants to think of as this, like, thing that's playing all these things and wreaking havoc in the mad scientist laboratory of life and nature, who's to say that that whole cycle won't happen again? We're going to have the whole ring of evolution go again from these little organisms, and maybe in a couple million years or whatever, a couple 100 million years, we'll be back to exactly where we were, and we're going to have people again. And in the meantime, like, who knows how many other living beings suffered and died and whatever. So this, again, it's a logical fail. You will recreate the same thing potentially, and you cannot be certain that it won't happen again, or that it will happen any better or any differently. So that's the other thing I wanted to say. And then so what is my answer to this? What I would say to inmendham or anybody else who is an antinatalist is that I don't think I see too many vegans who are saying to people, go out and have tons of kids. Look at my videos. Have I told people to go out and have a ton of kids? No. Has Logan said that? No. It's again, they're trying to twist things to make it almost seem like you're a pro-natalist if you're not a anti-natalist. That's not necessarily the case. And they're trying to always like twist things to make it seem like that's the case. But my point is this, what can we do? Is it a problem that mankind is causing, an immense amount of suffering? Yes, absolutely. And is the non-vegan animal agriculture a huge problem? Yes, it is. And inmendham tries to make slight of that. And he actually said that, like, oh, it's just a tiny fraction. It almost doesn't even matter compared to the amount of suffering that's happening in the natural world. Well, I did a video a few weeks back where I talked about the impact of environmental, kind of like impact of animal agriculture versus plant animal agriculture, and I showed you guys a chart by, what's the guy's name, Sailesh Krishna Rao. Go check out that video. I'll put the link in the description and watch that. And in it, I show a chart, which I'm going to put just briefly on the screen here. It's the biomass distribution of megafauna. This is a chart that the guy presents in his presentation where he shows what we had of basically, I think these are animals that are over, I think, like 10 kilograms or something. So they're like larger animals from 100 to 10,000 years ago. So 100,000 to 10,000 years ago, and humanity was a tiny little, almost like insignificant portion of the total, which were wild animals. And then it shows what we have now in today's day and age, and basically the humans are now double what all the wild animals were previously. The wild animals are a small portion of that original size, and then what we have is the domesticated livestock that are several times more than all of the megafauna included, up until about 10,000 years ago. Look at that and tell me that inmendham is not wrong. animal agriculture is a huge contributor to the suffering. If you did end that, you would actually reduce the suffering, if that's what he's like primarily interested in. And he's already doing that, so he's already vegan. So that's great. But he's trying to make slight of it and trying to say like that's not enough. I'm not saying it is enough. I'm trying to tell people to go and garden and do fruit trees. It's like you can't get much more ethical than that. Going and picking an apple off the tree, excuse me, or off the floor after it fell, and not having to hurt animals even to get that, even to the point of like little bugs or mice. I'm talking about going back to small scale, like human manageable, you pick it up with your hands type of agriculture. That's what I'm talking about. And again, am I trying to slight somebody if that's not what they're willing to do? No, every step in the right direction is important. But he's trying to make it sound like the only thing is that's okay is like full on anti-natalism and like blowing up the world and destroying it. And again, like think of this whole thing, like what is the point? Like the sun's going to engulf the earth anyway. If we don't like get our stuff together and get, working together as people, we're going to be burned up by the sun at some point anyway. Like, okay, yeah, there's going to be some more suffering till then, but like, does it really matter? And is it going to be any less than blowing up the world with a nuclear bomb? Like, really? I mean, come on. And then some people in the comments said, well, we could sterilize all the animals or whatever. Again, how are you going to sterilize all the animals? You can't get their consent. And even if you do it forcefully, which is already pretty immoral, are you going to actually be going down to the tiny, like single cell organism level? And if not, then how can you, prevent those from running the same cycle in a few 100 million years, producing the same, kind of issue? So again, it's just illogical. My advocacy is for telling people to try to be as light environmental impact as possible. I want people to grow fruit. I want people to help other people. I acknowledge that there's tons of stuff that I do that could be better. I'm living in a house. I have plastic around me. I have electricity. I'm using the internet. It's not perfect, and is some of my benefit and some of my joy coming from the expense of somebody else in a poorer part of the world, a brown-skinned person who we're stealing their oil from and taking their natural resources? Yeah. And I feel really bad about that. And quite frankly, it's one of the reasons why I actually moved away from the U.S., because I think there's a lot of bad kind of stuff that's happening. And I'm ashamed of a lot of the things that are happening here in Hungary, all over the world. There's no perfect place. I haven't found it yet. Otherwise, I'd try to be living there yet. And I've talked about this in my video about voting, and go watch that. You'll get a better understanding of where I stand on these issues. My thinking is that you can only help fix these things and make these things better by thinking globally, but acting locally. So think of that person in the far-flung part of the world that you have an impact on. Watch my video a few days ago. I posted about growing pineapple. Why do I want to grow my pineapple? Because I don't want a slave labor poor kid in some far-flung part of the world growing a pineapple for me. That's why. But I can grow one and keep it in a container and hopefully get my own pineapple here, so I can get the benefit of getting the pineapple without any additional suffering caused to somebody else. And that's what I'm encouraging other people to do. So, again, there's, technology is getting better. You can reduce your impact on other people. You can get pleasure without causing other people pain. And like inmendham said, and which I wanted to commend him on, and I would have if he had actually, stayed on to talk in a normal, way, is that, I think he's doing a great job at telling people, some of these things that they are doing that are harmful and that are giving them pleasure or causing them, kind of like a better quality of life at the expense of somebody else. And I think that is wrong. And, this is like, we should be concerned about where was this shirt made? Was it done with slave labor? Was it done with like a child labor, whatever? And yeah, we should be concerned about these things and we should be working on them. And the solution is not to blow up the world. The solution is not to kill people that don't want to be killed. Again, like I'm not suggesting that the solution is to go and have even more kids, but there's this idea that it's somehow immoral to have a child just because it may experience more suffering in its life than good, or that it may only experience only experience pain at the expense of somebody else suffering. That's not a guaranteed. I'm talking about the kind of existence that I want to make for myself and my family. I want to talk about the kind of existence where you are basically like self-sufficient locally. That's what I'm working towards. Not total self-sufficiency or reliant, like I don't need to be reliant on anybody else, but think about, where things are headed now. You can make your own electricity. You can, harvest your own rainwater. You can do your own waste management. You can grow your own food on very small land, and people are demonstrating this more and more every day. People are going off grid. People are doing more and more things like this, and the information, the technology is out there. People can do this. That is what I think people should be advocating for. It's a much easier sell, but again, that's not the argument for it. But it's much more moral. It comes with a lot less confounding kind of problems and those kind of gray areas that I talked about. So yeah, I think I've covered everything I want to say for the most part. I'm kind of still open to talk with people about antinatalism if they want to. Hopefully this video clarifies a lot of kind of where, what I would say in a debate if it does happen. I know, Logan said several people contacted him afterward and said that they would, be happy to debate in a nice, civilized manner. I don't think, Inmendham is going to watch this and want to talk in a normal way. I don't think that's his style. Like I said, I think, he's probably going to play this and respond to it by mocking me or, whatever. That's fine. That's his thing. I'm just, all right. My video had to restart. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to respond to this in a cordial manner, but that's on him. So, if the opportunity comes up, I'll talk to other people about it. But if not, I think I'm done with this topic for the most part. Unless somebody can bring up good counter arguments to what I've said, I think I'm pretty much done with what I've said. Hopefully that's interesting and explains a little bit more to people, and also kind of shows that I was prepared to talk about these topics a lot more intelligently than I think I was given credit for. So hopefully this was good for everybody to see and interesting, and if you are an antinatalist yourself, maybe it's gonna give you some additional things to think about, and I think that's it. Oh yeah, just one last thing. Again, addressing some of the comments in the video after the fact. A lot of people brought up these kind of stories of, tell this to my friend who's dying of cancer, or tell this to my friend who has some horrible debilitating disease. Yeah, well, what I would be interested in is, would that person, say to you that they wish they had never existed to avoid that pain and suffering? Because I would be kind of surprised. I've known several people who have had very, very bad conditions and did, die after a lot of suffering. And I haven't seen that to be the rule, that those people regret that they've lived their lives. I think, you watch a lot of interviews with people and you talk to people, and what you find is that a lot of people are actually still grateful for their life, and they are still happy that they lived it. And I know that Benatar says to this that that's just because they're stupid and because they have a bias towards living, and that they associate more positiveness than should with the pleasure and not enough with the negative, and blah blah blah. Okay, fine, it's a perception, but again, perceived reality sometimes is reality. And if that person doesn't say to you that they wish they had never existed, then who are you to decide for them that it's better off that they would have never existed? So that's going to be the closing thing. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you in the next one, and yeah, that's it. See you guys. Bye.